We now have an FAA report that a military helicopter and a regional jet have collided near Reagan National Airport, and it looks to appear that that crash took place over the Potomac. We go back to our own Chad Pergram is on the phone. He's on the scene. Chad, what do you have?
Yeah, we've been told that all of the all the water rescue boats from anywhere in the area have been dispatched to this area, and they're trying to figure out a potential casualty point at this stage.
Breaking tonight, we're getting some word out of northeast Philadelphia of what's believed to be a small plane crashing into a number of houses there. Waiting for some pictures there. I think we have them coming to us from Fox 29 in Philadelphia. Fires burning in multiple spots. If you know that area, northeast Philadelphia, Cotman Avenue and Roosevelt Boulevard. We're being told by Fox 29 that multiple fires are burning. There are pieces of what appears to be this airplane scattered here. That's from Steve Keeley, one of the reporters from Fox 29.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Jay Shakur Uncensored, where I do my best to help you, be it in me interviewing somebody or in me talking to you directly like I'm doing now, to think freely so that you can live fully. I want to share my thoughts on the tragic plane crash or crashes that we've seen in the last week. In a span of 7 or so days, we've seen, really, I think in less than 72 hours, we saw tragic plane crashes that leave you wondering. They leave you wondering why. In a lot of instances, it leaves you wondering why, what happened, why does this have to be right now? I remember seeing the news of both plane crashes. I heard the news while I was in the gym, of all places. The DC plane crash and the plane crash in Philadelphia. I heard the news literally in the gym, both times via Twitter or X or whatever, whatever we're calling it now. And the first plane crash, the DC plane crash from the commercial airliner, crashed with the Black Hawk military helicopter. I was in shock because I have lived in DC. I lived in DC for 5 years for my undergrad, and then I did a year there outside of undergrad, and I was in complete shock. I did not understand. I still don't understand. I have traveled in and out of Reagan while I lived in DC for those 5 years constantly. And since not living there, I've traveled in and outside of Reagan constantly. I've used American Airlines. I've used nearly every, I've used Delta. I've used Southwest. I've taken that same route. It's a tricky airspace. It's a complicated airspace right over the Potomac, and it is you're sober. You're more vigilant, I should say, and you're sobered up when you are put in the place of that could have been me. That could have been me, and hearing how this was an ice skating team on this plane, and these are young lives taken, lost, and seeing that, it was sobering. It was. That was me. That was me, in the sense of taking that route, landing at that airport, doing so many times that it becomes second nature to a point, to an extent. And so it happening and it being the deadliest plane crash of this type in decades is also a perspective shifting, perspective making, perspective molding circumstance. And I was hesitant to react or to share my thoughts on it on the podcast, but I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to push myself to do it. I'm going to do it. And I'm doing it because I feel the question a lot of people are asking right now is why. On both a logical and aviation level, that's being investigated. Every side, everybody has their claims. I'm going to say, let the investigators do the investigating and let's get to the bottom of what actually happened that night, both in DC and in Philadelphia. And then there's the question of why on the philosophical level, the spiritual level. And I think I can not necessarily answer that, but I think I can give perspective as we wait for answers. Outside of what we know so far. So I want to recap what we do know. I want to recap what we do know as of right now when it comes to uh, um, this tragedy, this tragic event. Midair collision kills 67 people in the deadliest U.S. air disaster in almost a quarter century. This is extremely sad. Extremely sad. A midair collision between an Army helicopter, Black Hawk, and a jetliner, commercial jetliner, killed all 67 people aboard the two aircrafts. That's according to officials, as they're looking into the actions of the military pilot in the country is deadliest. This is the country is deadly. This is our deadliest aviation disaster in almost a quarter century. At least 28 bodies were pulled from the icy waters of the Potomac River after the helicopter apparently flew into the path of the American Airlines regional jet late Wednesday. This would be Wednesday, that date. I want to make sure because they're writing an AP style journalist. It can be confusing. Wednesday, January 29th, 2025 is what they're referring to right there. Into the Potomac River at the helicopter apparently flew into the path of the American Airlines regional jet late on January 29th, 2025, while it was landing at Ronald Reagan National Airport, just across the river from Washington, officials said. The plane carried 60 passengers and 4 crew members. That's the 64 plus the 3 soldiers who were aboard that military helicopter. And those people, unfortunately, died. They unfortunately died. It's a tragedy beyond measure. I can't really articulate how sad this truly, honestly, it is. No one survived. That's according to all reports. No one survived. And the crash occurred around 9 p.m. in some of the most tightly controlled and monitored airspace in the world, just about 3 miles south of the White House and the United States Capitol. And again, I know this airspace all too well in the sense that I've traveled this space and been in this airport dozens of times. And this is an eerie picture from the airport. Ronald Reagan International Airport, of screen saying, due to an emergency situation, Reagan National Airport is currently closed. Passengers, please see your airline representatives for additional information. An eerie sight. And it's sad. It is truly sad. I was watching some of the news reports from local stations in DC. I have an opinion because of my day job that local news is better than national news in many senses when something like this happens, in terms of the reporting of it, in terms of the reporting on it. And a man was texting his wife, and we all know, we all been in that situation where we're texting our loved ones, our friends. I'm landing, we get close, we get below, we get like 200 feet from the ground, 400 feet from the ground. We can now turn our phone off of airplane mode, and we can text our people and turn off airplane mode and connect, to our cellular device and text people and start, looking for all this stuff. We can do all this stuff. And this wife of a man waiting to pick up the wife of a gentleman who was at the airport waiting to pick her up, texted him, said she was landing. He responded and didn't deliver. And that's when he said, according to this news report, that's when he knew something was wrong. Tragic. Tragic. So the questions that are being asked now is why. That's, the prevailing, if you will, sentiment or what people are thinking. And then we had this occur January 31st. According to Breaking 911, the pediatric patient aboard the jet that crashed in Philadelphia was returning home after being sponsored by a charity to get life-saving treatment. That's according to a local NBC affiliate there. They're reporting that coming from a spokesperson for Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. And Greg Horn, who's a commentator, retweeted this or reposted this, and he said this, and this is what provoked the conversation I want to have today. He said, "This is one of the saddest headlines I have ever read. I concur. I agree. The type of headline that invokes the most uncomfortable philosophical questions about life." I think this incident in Philadelphia, as well, of course, the tragedy in DC, invokes the most uncomfortable philosophical questions about life. And again, I can't answer them. I'm not pretending that I can, but I do know and I do believe there's some perspective I can share. Life is short, life is sudden, and I think that is the baseline principle that we learned from these two tragedies, these back-to-back tragedies in this past week. Life is short, life is sudden. We're often reminded of that when the hurricane rips through a town like in North Carolina, or a fire blazes and burns in California. We're often reminded of that when a loved one who is vibrant and young and living their life and healthy and quote unquote did everything right, but they go for a routine checkup and they're diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Life is short. Life is sudden. Let me break that phrase down a bit. Life is short in the sense that, while you may live to be 150, I want to be 105 when I leave this earth, ideally. While you may live in terms of the numerical value of your life longer than others, meaning you may live to 50, 60, 70, 80, while others only made it to 10, 15, 20, 30 years of age. That's still short in the sense of not the numerical value, but in the sense of experience, in the sense of meaning, if that's making sense. I'll try to make it make sense if it's not making sense right now. So life is short. I can just look in my own life and I can recall and remember, and I look back, I can remember being in middle school, and now I'm a grown adult, full-time career, closer to 30 than I ever was before, at this point in my life. And it seems just like yesterday, I was freaking out and nervous that I wouldn't pass the ACT. You know what I'm saying? Life is short because what seems like it was just yesterday is further and further away. Life is sudden in the sense that you never know what could happen, what will happen to change the course and the direction of your personal journey on this planet. I remember being in college, Howard University. Diploma's back there. Degree, I should say, is back there. Proof, zoom in, proof is in the pudding. But no, for real. I remember being in college, proud of myself, happy, life is good. I thought, or it was. I'm not gonna say I thought life was good. Um, in the nation's capital, interning on Capitol Hill, you know, having opportunity after opportunity, doors open at door open after door open, studying at one of the country's most elite historically black colleges or historically black universities, and everything is just going great. And I'm talking about how life is sudden, and my grandmother moves in with my mother, so she has a steady eye on my grandmother, which is something that comforted me because I was a grandmother's boy. And so being away from my grandmother all the way in DC was, a little disconcerting because I didn't, my grandmother at the time when I went off to college was in her early, in her mid 90s. And I was comfortable that she was now, with my mother, and she was being taken care of, and it seemed like the family was becoming a bit of a cohesive unit. And the summer right before my second semester, going right before the second semester of my sophomore year, I believe. I may be off on the timing. My grandmother had a stroke. I'm talking about how life is sudden. And within the year, she was dead. And she's 90 something, so it's not like, she's going to live another 90 years. That's not what I don't think that's not the expectation that any of us in the family had. But she was healthy every other way, in the sense of 90, still able to do mostly for herself. Still able to feed herself, wake herself up, go to the bathroom herself. She had arthritis and, the natural issues of an aging body. But other than that, she was fairly normal. No critical sicknesses or illnesses, right? She didn't have dementia. She didn't have any of that. Or so we thought that's how her story was going to end. Had a stroke. Completely paralyzed her, I believe it was her left side. And we had to do everything for her. And it immobilized her. She ended up in a nursing home, something that we never wanted to do, but it was all that could be done. And it was frustrating. I'm away from college, and I'm trying to get back, and then she dies. I remember the night she died. I remember that whole weekend, or those whole few days surrounding her death. Actually, I was away at college, second semester of my sophomore year, and I was calling my mom, FaceTime my mom, talking to her, checking in on family. And my mom took the phone and placed it to her. She didn't see, she didn't know, she didn't, she was laying in a bed, half paralyzed, could only eat liquid food and drink liquid substances, I should say. And we talked for a bit. And the last thing I said to her, now this is what I'm always grateful for, that I got to say this, and she knew it. I got to say, I love you. And she said, I love you too. And through her slurred speech, she said, I love you too. And I knew that was it. I had an instinctive knowledge, inward knowing that this is it. I didn't know if it was going to be that day, that night. I didn't know any of that. But this is it. Next day, my mother called. Bye. We doing our routine, checking in, talking, whatever. And we hang up, and I go, I think it was something where class was either canceled or something was where the next day I knew I was staying up later because the next day I didn't have class for some reason, but it was abnormal that I didn't have class. And we hang up. I get a call right back, which is not normal. Why are you calling me right back? We just hung up. Like we talked exhaustively. What are you gonna call me back 2 seconds later for? Is the thinking. And I knew when I got the call back what the news was. My grandmother just passed away. It didn't shatter my world. I wasn't hysterical. I had a moment, but I got myself together. And it showed me how things happen suddenly, meaning she was in her mid-90s. She wasn't going to live forever, but it was so sudden in the sense of everything seemed normal leading up to it. And all of a sudden, the breakdown came. I can imagine if I don't want to imagine. It's hard to imagine those final moments on that plane. That wife texting her husband saying, "Hey, we're about to land." Those kids, uh, getting their bags ready to get up and get off the plane, and then all of a sudden, almost instantaneous, an instant crash. There's no time to stop, no time to think, and you're dead. Last week, 2 weeks ago, this time they were living their life. 2 weeks ago before the crash, they were doing their thing. They were ice skating ring. To my understanding, they were ice skating ring or ice skating champions, or they were heavily involved in that sport and they were highly recognized. And then all of a sudden now they're dead. Life is sudden. And people can respond multiple ways to that. And I journal, and I wrote down in my journal, you can't control this fact about life. You can't control the fact that life is short. Life is sudden. It's an unchangeable truth. You can't control this fact, but you can control how you respond to it. And people choose to respond in a few different ways, in my belief. They respond in despair because they know they can't control the fact that life is short and life is sudden. They choose to respond oftentimes in despair. And they do so by degrading themselves, disrespecting themselves, destroying themselves, be it through drugs, alcohol, addiction, whatever. And that's the nihilistic approach. That's the detrimental, destructive approach. But others respond with and in desire and destiny. And they say, because life is short, because life is sudden, I need to make the most of it and ensure that I'm doing everything I need to do to fulfill the purpose from which I was placed on this planet to fulfill. And so my question to you, my thought to you is, which path will you choose? Even watching this tragedy, you may not be directly connected to any of the victims in these plane tragedies over the last few days, but you may still be responding in despair. My question to you is, which path will you take? Or if you didn't know, you have options. You don't have to respond in despair. Now, that's easier said than done, because you have powers. The powers that be will exploit the fear that you have in your despair and make you more fearful and more pessimistic. But you can choose to either respond in despair or respond in desire, or with desire and destiny. And obviously, the response in desire and destiny is the ideal path. So what's the baseline for choosing either path? Desire and destiny, or despair? I think the baseline is understanding a principle about life. Going back to what Greg said. Greg said, the type of headlines that we've been seeing the last few days invoke the most uncomfortable philosophical questions about life. But just because those questions are quote unquote uncomfortable does not mean they shouldn't be asked. Does not mean they don't have an answer. And I think they do. Genesis 18:25. Disclaimer, I'm a Christian. So that means I believe the Bible. And if that's something you don't rock with, I'm sorry, but I'm Christian. Genesis 18:25. In the context of that verse, you're dealing with Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And God's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah and bad things happening and the threat of Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed. And this is what Abraham says. We can start at 23. Abraham drew near and said, "Will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked?" He was asking this of God about Lot, right? His nephew. Will you destroy my son, my nephew who's righteous with those who you deem wicked, God? Right? Peradventure there be filthy righteousness within the city, blah 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 blah. Verse 25. That be far from you to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked that be far from you. Here's the key phrase, right? And I'm not equating, these tragedies to being God's judgment. I don't believe that stuff. I think that's crap. This is a tragic accident that should not be politicized, that should not be over spiritualized. I'm just being honest. But the key thing is this phrase, this question: shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Shall not the judge, tragic incidents happen, and they happen more than I would like them to. I would like them to happen 0, but they happen. 2 of them happened in the last week. And the question that must be asked and answered is, shall not the judge of all the earth do what's right? And then you have to ask another question. Okay, will the judge of the earth do what's right? The answer, I think, to that is yes. But then you have to ask the question of, then what is right? Was it right for these 67 people to be killed almost instantaneously, plunged into the cold Potomac River? That wasn't right. No. So what do you mean by the term right? I think, given my experience, it goes to the old saying, everything happens for a reason. And I think when you ask the question, shall not the judge of all the earth do what's right? Yes, he will. And then you ask the question, what is right? You can't assume you can't assume a place into that what is right always feels good. Because what is right doesn't always feel good. So in this moment, of these headlines in the news, some tragic, some sad, some baffling, some angering, some that make you frustrated, show up and pop up, and they invoke the uncomfortable questions, the uncomfortable philosophical questions about life. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to innocent people? I think the answer is, if it provides any comfort at all, I don't know. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? I think he will. And in my finite limitations, I don't understand always the thinking, the actions, the preponderance of the infinite. Going back to my situation, why my grandmother had to go the way she did when everything seemed like it was good, I don't know. She suffered for a bit there after that stroke. Why it had to happen to her, a good woman, who would literally, I mean it, literally give you, it's not a phrase, literally give you the shit off her back. Why she had to do that or why she had to go through that, I don't understand it. But I think as Christians, when we're confronted with those uncomfortable philosophical questions about life, I think the answer, and I think it's okay to give the answer of, I don't know. I don't know. But I do know the judge of the earth will always do what's right. That's my belief as a Christian. Beyond our thoughts and our prayers that are with those impacted in Philadelphia and those impacted in the DC plane crash, let our thoughts and prayers be with those people who are, some I know, living in fear. They're seeing 2 planes fall out of the sky or crash in less than a week. And they're like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm not flying. Let's pray for them as well. Because another key to this, and I think maybe I'll talk about that in another episode. Another key to this is the aspect of fear. The aspect of fear. When you see this stuff happening, you instantly, when you don't have answers to why it's happening and what's going on, the default mode for a lot of human beings is fear. It's fear. Will not the judge of all the earth do what is right? Yes, I think he will. It's our position, and it should be our position, to trust that he is in control. That's coming from me as a Christian man who believes that God will right whatever seems wrong. Thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for tuning in. Share, like if you're watching. Share, like, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening via any podcasting platform, please share with others. Why do bad things happen to innocent people? That's something we gotta dissect and talk about and dive deeper into. I don't have answers for that, but I do think God is in control, and he is where we go for comfort when tragedy like this occurs. Thank you all for listening. I'll see y'all next time.